What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, February 21, 2019 here. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. In fact, I do have a lot to talk about today, so don't call in just to hear yourself on the radio. Please keep it on topic and relevant, and we'll all get along just fine here. Before we get into it, though, a word of explanation, because I got a ton of email about the show yesterday, and it seems that just as we were starting to do the show, we lost our internet, our cable TV, everything, and we didn't get it back till last night. It turned out there was a distribution amplifier that failed, and it basically took out the entire neighborhood. So it wasn't something that was targeted on me. And they got it fixed and up and running. We're still getting the slow speed. You know, we're supposed to be getting 300 megabits per second, but we're not. But that's what happened yesterday. But we're back live today and ready to get on into it. All right, so let's start with Venezuela. And I'm going to apologize up front. I may repeat a couple of stories from the beginning of yesterday's show because I don't really know when it stopped here. But I'm starting to see these articles that are coming out in places like Russia Today that's saying that, you know, this thing about going into Venezuela might not have been such a really good idea. And Russia Today is out there saying that Trump's Venezuela gamble is turning out to be a beaten docket and looking like a fatal overreach. And I agree. The U.S. military is already overextended. We've got military operations in 39% of the countries on the face of planet Earth. And Trump was unable to get out of Afghanistan because the general in charge of that doesn't want to lose his job. And Trump wasn't able to get out of Syria because the generals in charge of Syria don't want to lose their jobs. And so where are we going to get the troops here? Now, right now, the South American country, Venezuela, their military is remaining firmly loyal to President Maduro. There's some propaganda out there that, oh, there's all these defections going on, but so far we're not seeing any kind of confirmation. We think it's just more war propaganda. I think what they're trying to do is encourage military defections by saying, oh, everybody else is leaving. You're not seeing it, but trust us, and all the other units, they're leaving, so you should leave too. But it does look like Trump has bit off more than he can chew here. And right in the middle of the Project for the New America Centuries war agenda, a major loss like this coming on the Afghan stalemate, the Syrian stalemate, this could really derail the war agenda, which, let's be honest, would be a good thing. Okay? Now, this story coming out of Sputnik News calling it a stalled coup and saying that U.S. allies may soon regret that they rushed to embrace Guaido because the coup attempt is not going well. And, you know, this whole so-called Venezuela crisis has been engineered through economic sanctions, plotted in Washington for many years, product of decades of economic warfare. Guaido is very obviously a tool of the CIA. And a lot of people are pointing back to the 2002 coup attempt plotted by Elliot Abrams, Donald Trump's current Venezuela special envoy, and that one failed. That was the one that got Hugo Chavez out of office for a grand total of 2 days. And with a record of failure like that, of course, you know, we'll give him another chance here. You know, he'll try extra hard because he messed it up so bad the last time here. Story coming out of Global Research. Is there a Venezuela false flag brewing under the cloak of the humanitarian convoy? And this is originally from Russian media saying that, yes, there's going to be some kind of a false flag to justify U.S. military intervention because the internal coup has failed. They have not been able to create a color revolution. They've not been able to get the military to turn on Maduro. And the only thing that's left, the U.S. isn't going to walk away. They've invested too much political capital. They're too visible on this. Maduro must go is the new, they're replacing Assad must go with Maduro must go. And you're starting to see all this talk about the humanitarian convoy. And the corporate media, when they're not talking about Jussie Smollett and Roger Stone being in court, which seems to be all they're talking about today, the corporate media is making a big deal about the U.S. aid sitting at the Colombian border and how cruel Maduro is refusing to let the aid through. Well, aid is coming into Venezuela. It's coming in from Russia, China, other Maduro allies. Hundreds of tons of it is coming in. It is only the aid from the United States that's being blocked under the suspicion, backed by historical precedent, that it is actually supplies intended for paramilitary groups working to bring Maduro down. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to go to the phones to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, this whole thing in Venezuela, it's the thing I find most interesting about this is the silence of the left on this. You figure, where's the hands-off Venezuela movement amongst the left-wing progressives? I mean, most of them say they're socialists. You think they'd be out and protested and saying they support Maduro? I think it just shows how the deep state really controls the left. I mean, George Soros probably wants this guy gone too, and it's really, it's like the silence is deafening. Yes. On the left, because I understand it on the right. Obviously, they're for the neocon right, and you see like Rand Paul and the populist right isn't really for this invasion or overthrow in Venezuela. But you really don't see. It's like the leadership of the left. Really, even the left socialists aren't saying a word about this, and that just tells you that they're all phonies and they're all controlled by deep state, because they're normally they'd be out in the street over, hands off Venezuela, socialist friends, leave them alone, and so I just find it really interesting that the left is so quiet on this.
Well, in the arena of U.S. politics, the left and the right fight about all but two things. On two things, they always unanimously agree. One of them, of course, is Israel, and the other one is, of course, perpetuating these wars. These wars have been planned for a very, very long time. The ultimate goal is to return the globe under U.S. hegemonic domination. It's not going very well, which is why we're risking an absolute military disaster if we continue. But from the point of view of the U.S. government, they have gone too far down this agenda. They can't turn around and go back without immediately collapsing the economy.
But, the left was very active with the Contras and the Nicaragua action. They were always supportive of Cuba. And just all of a sudden, I guess they get the word, like, if you just get out in the street for Venezuela, you're going to lose your funding and your NGO status, whatever it is. It's obvious that they've got them on a leash.
No. They're too busy arguing about which bathroom they're supposed to be using to get involved in world politics anymore.
Yeah, and I wanted to comment on this thing about the aid to Venezuela being blocked. Nobody seemed to care about the aid to the Palestinians, that the aid ships when the Israelis blocked them. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
And then the same group that's all complaining about Maduro not letting in the aid, they were all for the Israelis killing a guy. Remember, they killed that one guy.
Yes. On
an aid ship. So the hypocrisy once again is really sick.
It is.
Anyway, I'll let you go. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, there are a lot of claims being made about Venezuela, and one of them is that Hezbollah is in there, even though nobody can figure out why Hezbollah would bother, that Iran is in there, and now they're saying that, Cuba has got forces in Venezuela. So they're trying to build a case for a military intervention. We have to get Hezbollah, we have to get Iran, we have to get Cuba. Cuba is denying that they have any forces whatsoever in Venezuela. They are saying they expect a U.S. military intervention in the next 48 hours, which means over the weekend. All they need is the excuse. And I made an oblique reference here to corporate media being totally absorbed right now with Roger Stone being in court and Jussie Smollett being in court. I can clearly feel the condensation that is going on. So if there's going to be a false flag involving Venezuela, it's going to be sprung as a complete surprise here. Now, Venezuela is starting to close their borders. They've started to close their borders with the neighboring islands in the Caribbean. They closed their border with Brazil last night. Tonight they're going to do that. And it looks like they're going to close the border with Colombia as well to basically prevent somebody marching on in and taking their country away from them. Now, for some reason, Richard Branson has drawn a lot of hot water. He wanted to set up a Venezuela Live Aid concert. And Roger Waters, who used to be the front man for Pink Floyd, is slamming Branson's plan, saying it's a sham, and that Branson is part of the program to bring about the regime change. So they're arguing about that. Okay. Now, getting on over into Syria, they're now admitting that the United States is not, in fact, pulling out of Syria. And they're even going so far as saying the U.S. is likely to retain control of northeast Syria after the troop pullout. So some of the troops are going to be pulled out, probably dropped down in Venezuela. But the U.S. wants to keep hanging on to northeast Syria. Nobody, of course, has asked the Syrian government how they feel about it. But the U.S. wants to keep control over the Kurdish-populated areas by keeping its troop in neighboring Iraqi Kurdistan and reserving the right to intervene if needed. So that's what the U.S. is doing in Syria. You know, keep your hands off the Kurds, or we'll come on back in. And there we go. Siri activated and was trying to figure out what it was going to do with all that I was just saying here. Okay, a lot of people have been wondering why the S-300 missiles in Syria are not being used against Israeli warplanes. And it's really a very simple reason. Israel has a bad habit of using civilian flights as shields. Now, this is against international law, but they keep on doing it. And Syria and their Russian trainers do not want to take the chance of an accidental shoot down of a civilian plane, knowing that that would play right into the hands of both Israel and the United States. So that's why we're not seeing those S-300s get used. When a real war breaks out and the civilian air traffic diverts away from that area and the skies are clear, then we'll see it. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Mark in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I just wanted to mention that Venezuela, Guyana, and Brazil have a common border section that is full of sweet crude oil,
yes,
whereas Venezuela itself has the dirty oil. That's the conflict. That's the fight. That's what the oligarchs are trying to steal, in my opinion.
Well, that's definitely one of the things that the war party wants to steal. Remember, wars and assassinations are never carried out for just one reason. You have a group of overlapping agendas, and where they overlap, they all agree war would be a good thing or assassination would be a good thing, and that's when it happens. You've got banking interests that want to go into Venezuela. You've got Trump wants Venezuela to be obedient to the United States. Yes, the oil companies want that oil underneath that border. We were talking about that earlier in the week. And so it looks like the war is on.
Yep. Trump, send your kids to fight first.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I miss the good old days when leaders who wanted a war would lead their own troops into battle. You know, people like Napoleon. And let's see. And there we go. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Let's see. Yeah, this equipment is getting very, very old, starting to wear out here. All right, getting on back to the news. Russia is suggesting that the white helmets be put on trial for crimes they committed in Syria, including the faked videos of chemical attacks. And this is coming from Russia's director of the Foreign Ministry's Department of New Challenges and Threats, Aiea Rogachev, told TASS in an interview. And he said the leading Western countries have failed to place the struggle against terrorism above their own time-serving political interests. Well, boy, is that not an understatement right there. So Russia wants to take the white helmets up to The Hague and have them put on trial. And one more. There we go. Hang on. Testing. There we are. Okay. So, the white helmets, in a pathetic bid to try and rebuild their good guy image, put up a Sky News video of them rescuing a pair of puppies from the rubble following a rocket attack. It was a 31-second clip, and Twitter just erupted with whatever the social media equivalent of eye-rolling is, saying, come on, this is just another fake put out by the white helmets. For one thing, supposedly these puppies survived a rocket attack, and being buried under the rubble, there was no visible sign of injury. That's pretty obvious there. Let's talk about Iraq a little bit. The Iraq government wants the United States to leave. The Iraqi people wants the United States to leave. Is the U.S. going to leave? No. And the proof of it has to do with that U.S. embassy in Iraq. It's called an embassy, but it's obviously much more than that. It covers 80 football fields and was clearly intended to be a central command post, if you will, from which to rule the Middle East. I mean, it's 104 acres. It's 6 times larger than the United Nations headquarters in New York. And it's 10 times larger than the new embassy Washington is building in Beijing. Clearly, when they built that, it was with the intent that they were going to stay there for a very, very long time. All righty. Remember what I said before. We've got all these generals there who love being in charge of armies, who love, sending other people into battle and feeling powerful and wonderful, and they don't want to give that up. They don't want to retire. They don't want to transfer. They want more promotions here. So we've got Central Command Chief General Joseph Votel, who's out there publicly contradicting President Trump on foreign policy stances, which is something that active U.S. military leadership has not done in the past, except for, of course, General MacArthur, for which he got fired, which I'm sending as a hint to anybody from Trump spies who are listening to me here. But Votel went out of his way to basically criticize both the Syria withdrawal, and he's now out there saying, Afghanistan is still a dangerous threat. They're still a dangerous threat. Now, Trump hasn't announced a withdrawal date from Afghanistan yet, but there are peace talks going on with the Taliban. And it's looking good. People are hoping that the Afghanistan war, second longest war in U.S. history, will soon be over. Of course, it's going to be replaced by a bunch of other wars. Anyway, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. We're going to go back to the phones here to Jim in Chicago. Jim, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Do you have any more information about those 5 American mercenaries that were arrested in Haiti and they were sent back to Miami last night?
No, other than the fact that they were obviously there to support the Haitian government against the uprising. But now that it's known that they're there, they're a political embarrassment. So I can understand why they were sent back.
Now, were there any charges against these guys or not?
No, why would the Haiti government charge these guys, who were there to help them, by shooting some of the protesters?
Oh, okay. Because I know one of there were 8 guys altogether. One was a Haitian, and 2 guys were from Serbia, I believe.
Yeah.
So, and speaking of Haiti, I was listening to a broadcast yesterday, and they were saying there's an embargo against Haiti and some of the other Caribbean countries due to the fact that Venezuela was providing free oil for them. Do you know anything about that?
Well, yes. Venezuela has been very generous in supporting its South American neighbors, which is why it came as a shock that some of them immediately hopped on board with Trump and said, yes, Guaido is the legitimate president of Venezuela. But there may have been some arm twisting going on. But yeah, this situation in Venezuela is going to have repercussions throughout the entire region. Because with Venezuela no longer able to provide oil to these countries, they're going to be in a world of hurt unless the United States steps in and starts giving them oil, which only adds to the cost of the war.
Right. And several years ago, Venezuela was giving oil to the people on the eastern part of America.
Yes.
Do you remember that? Because I think Kennedy was helping with that situation.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't all that long ago during one of these really harsh winters that we've been going through, and apparently there were some areas of the country that were running out of fuel oil to heat people's homes, and Venezuela just sent some.
Right. And finally, Michael, what is wrong with Roger Stone? He can't help himself. He just cannot keep his mouth shut.
Seems to be a problem, and he's back in court today. He apologized to the judge, and I don't know how that's going to end, and frankly, I'm not all that curious.
Right. All right, then. Well, Michael, you take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, I may have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yeah, and Roger Stone, he's a showman, so that's why he says what he says, and probably nothing's going to happen to him. But this will drag on. Hey, Mike, this previous caller, I remember when it was real cold on the East Coast, the Venezuela sent oil for free for the low-cost families.
Yes.
How the United States gives a crap. Does anybody remember if Exxon or Mobil gave free oil to low-income families on the East Coast?
Oh, no. They never give that oil away. It's too precious to them.
But you see how the United States, Britain, they all still use you, and they'll throw you in the garbage.
Yep.
When they're done. They don't care about us. They don't care about the poor people in this country. You're just expendable, But I mean, what a joke. What a joke. And now, Mike, I said like before that the coup is a failed coup, so I still don't see an invasion. I just see some kind of mercenaries stepping in, but it's going to be a hard nut to crack just because it's not Syria. There's no Wahhabist type of culture, from Saudi Arabia or whatever. It's going to be really hard to. They're on Maduro's side for the most part, and the military is too. So,
yeah.
I mean,
if Maduro has his army intact, mercenaries and jihadi groups, whatever you want to call them, paramilitaries, aren't going to have much success. And so I think that's probably the basis for Cuba to come on out and say there's going to be a full-on U.S. military intervention. Probably they'll just go right into Caracas and say, okay, this is now ours, we're putting in Guaido, and Maduro gets to retire to some island in the South Pacific somewhere. They certainly can't march in from the Colombian border because the U.S. traditionally does not do well in jungle combat situations. But looking at a map of Venezuela, it could very easily be a coastal assault from the Caribbean.
Yeah, we shall see if Trump is bluffing or not, or if Trump's not even in charge anymore. Who knows? But
well, there
hey,
was
Mike, did you?
there was one report that Trump was talking about invading Venezuela all the way back in August. That this actually is something he thought was really cool to do. Now, where he got the idea from, I don't know. Probably some oil billionaire donors.
Tells you how it tells you why we vote for this guy.
Well, again, I was voting against Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Okay. And campaigning against Hillary Clinton. Anyway, Dustin, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. We got to do another commercial break here. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to go back to the phones. Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, there's some breaking news. I'm trying to confirm the source, but it seems that Juan Guaido has just proclaimed himself president of Cuba, Nicaragua, Mexico, Russia, China, North Korea, and Italy.
Good for him.
I think power's gotten to this guy's head.
I think so. I mean, the guy was this mid-level politician. He's got no backing whatsoever. I mean, anybody can proclaim themselves anything. I could proclaim myself, Emperor of Hawaii. Doesn't mean anything.
You make an excellent emperor. Mike, I'll just leave you with this. I was going back to what McCabe said, Andrew McCabe, where he referenced, he said that Lisa Page, I believe, and the other, I can't remember the other guy's name, the two that were having a fling, they were good people.
Yes.
Kind of reminds me, Donald Trump used that same phrase to describe the Clintons. Right after he was elected president at that inaugural lunch, he said, the Clintons, they're good people. This is the same man who, while he was campaigning, he led his supporters, the two most popular chants were lock her up, build the wall, and lock her up.
Yes.
And what does he say upon becoming president? They're good people. That just tells you what kind of man he is, and it was all a scam. It was all a con job.
Well, it was either that or the deep state really did find the right buttons to push on Donald Trump, because again, we're seeing it. It's not just Donald Trump. The entire government is just steadfastly refusing to look at all of the Clinton campaign finance violations, the money laundering that was going on. They don't want to touch that Clinton Foundation. They still won't go near that email server. I mean, the Clintons are untouchables. They've got the goods on everybody. And probably because, everybody was dirty using that Clinton Foundation for money laundering and tax avoidance.
I agree. And I shake my head when I hear otherwise respectable commentators like Robert David Steele saying, and there's another YouTube channel that I watch sometimes, SGT Report, and these guys are still talking about indictments are imminent, and they're citing this QAnon character. I mean, it's just guys. They're just either deluding themselves or I don't know what.
Well, I think basically, we're all raised, the TV generation, that, there's going to be a lot of trouble, and then right before the end of the show, somebody comes in to save us, whether it's the Lone Ranger or the Cavalry or Batman or Battlestar Galactica or something like that. And I think the propagandists are relying on that by dropping hints that somebody else is going to fix the problems with the government, that we, the American people, will not put on our yellow vests and stand up and say, we're going to fix this mess ourselves.
I'm putting my money on the new Emperor of Hawaii. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to let you go. We had a caller who called on in saying it's snowing in Southern California with snow in Calabasas and Santa Monica Mountains. Oh, my goodness. Just snow in Southern California. Next commercial break, I got to do that search here. Okay. Last week, Representative Walter Jones Jr. passed away, and he had been staunchly opposed to wars. And apparently, in his memory, that's why the House voted in favor of House Joint Resolution 37, a resolution directing the removal of United States armed forces from hostilities in the Republic of Yemen that have not been authorized by Congress. Now, it was a pretty solid vote, 248 to 177. Unfortunately, I'm expecting that this will be Donald Trump's first veto in office here. Okay, the House Oversight Committee, which is now chaired by Democrat Elijah Cummings, has issued a report based on whistleblowers to warn about efforts inside the White House to rush the transfer of highly sensitive U.S. nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia in potential violation of the Atomic Energy Act. Now, this is all being spearheaded by Jared Kushner. Now, under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Saudi Arabia has a right to build nuclear power plants. And by the way, prior to the 1979 Iranian Revolution, they were running ads showing the Shah of Iran about how wonderful nuclear power was to try and calm down people who back then were getting a little bit nervous over whether this technology could be trusted. In any event, it's more politics than anything else because, as we reported earlier, Saudi Arabia has been getting nuclear weapons technology from Israel going back decades. So, alrighty, over in Ukraine, Poroshenko has signed a constitutional amendment committing the country to becoming a member of NATO and the European Union. Now, I know that the EU wanted Ukraine to come on in originally, back when Yanukovych was still in charge. But today, the place is a wreck. It's heavily in debt. It's a basket case. And taking Ukraine into the EU right now is going to put additional strain on its economies, just as Britain is getting ready to leave. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Frank in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hello. I didn't know Representative Walter Jones had passed, but he was one of the few here in North Carolina, and really, of any of them that I ever really respected, because he came out several times. I know once on the Bush Riley show when I was talking with him, he basically came out and said that pretty much almost all of Congress was compromised through blackmail, etc. He said that's why they do what they do. They're almost every one of them is compromised.
Yeah, I think they're basically all crooks. The only time when their crookedness is made public is to use it as a political weapon to get rid of them.
All right. Well, here's to Jones for telling the truth.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to turn our eyes over to Russia. Vladimir Putin, up until now, has been the voice of calm and reason. He's been a global statesman. He arranged for Assad to surrender his chemical weapons. He's been trying to tamp down all of this U.S. aggression around the world. Now he is starting to talk tough. He's changing his tack. And he's obviously very concerned about the United States' pullout from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, and saying that if the United States deploys intermediate range and short range missiles to Europe, Russia could target the U.S. missiles hosts and even America. So he's really talking serious nuclear warfare here. And he says it will be the policy of Russia to strike the decision centers, not just to destroy the missile sites, but to destroy the decision centers where the people who are sitting with their fingers on the button. Russia is also threatening to target the United States with their new hypersonic weapons if it deploys missiles to Europe. And then he went on to say that he's ready to go along with a new Cuban Missile Crisis if you want one. Now, the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 brought the world to the brink of a real nuclear war. It came very, very close. I mean, to the point where one Russian ship was about to fire on a U.S. warship and fortunately suffered a mechanical breakdown. And by the time they got it fixed, word had come on down from Khrushchev, we're pulling back. That's how close it got. I don't want to live in a world like that anymore. I don't want to go through a nuclear war. I've got a first strike nuclear target right out this window here. Now, you remember the USS Donald Cook? This was the ship that was totally paralyzed and embarrassed by a single Russian electronic warfare aircraft. Well, it's heading back into Black Sea. The Black Sea, it's in the Straits of Dardanelles right now, and it's being shadowed by Russian warships who want to keep an eye on it. As well they should. It's their backyard. I mean, if Russia sent a warship into the Gulf of Mexico, don't you think it would be shadowed by American warships? Just common sense, really. Okay, over in Israel, Netanyahu is really struggling with the upcoming election. It looks like Benny Gantz, who's not really an improvement in my eyes, but it looks like Gantz is going to be the next prime minister. And so Netanyahu is trying to move his party even further to the right. And it's almost like he's turning into the Israeli version of David Duke. So it's going to be interesting there. This is a big story over in Israel. Last Saturday, Channel 13 anchorwoman Oshrat Kotler commented on a case of a sadistic Israeli soldier beating a Palestinian father and son in the occupied territory. And she said they send children to the army, to the territories, and get them back human animals. That's the result of the occupation. And boy, have they come down hard on her. She hasn't lost her job as of the last report, but she's being condemned basically for reporting the news, which is what we get condemned for, too. This is a very alarming story coming out of Middle East Monitor. Apparently, Israel's pharmaceutical firms routinely test medicines on Palestinian prisoners and Arab prisoners. This is from Felstein.ps. And this is coming from Professor Nadira Shalhoub Kevorkian. And this Hebrew University lecturer also revealed the Israeli military firms are testing weapons on Palestinian children and carry out those tests in the Palestinian neighborhoods of occupied Jerusalem. And I remember during one of the previous Israeli incursions into Gaza, there were reports of a very strange area denial weapon involving super dense metal pellets that nobody had ever seen before. But this Professor Kevorkian said that the Palestinian spaces are being used as laboratories, which, by the way, is also a war crime. Israel has approved 464 new colonialist units in occupied Jerusalem for illegal colonialist settlers. So Israel just keeps on doing what Israel is doing, and they have absolutely no regard for international law, unless it's something they can point the finger at somebody else and say, they're in violation of international law. At which point the United States government would get up and say, by golly, you're right, it is. Okay, the African National Congress Youth League has affirmed its support for the international boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Now, speaking to Middle East Monitor on Monday, the Secretary General of South Africa's ruling party, Jabulo Mzuzu, stressed that its National Executive Committee even took a decision to work together with BDS South Africa. So this is why Israel is getting nervous. The world is turning against them. The world is no longer willing to put up with this nonsense that they're dealing with. Okay, over in Jordan, their ambassador is calling for the dismissal of the Israeli envoy and the return of Jordan's ambassador back to Jordan. That's usually a bad sign. When countries are recalling their ambassadors, it means they don't want to talk anymore. Apparently, Jordan is very upset at Israel's refusal to protect the Temple Mount, or at least the mosques, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, from settler attacks. And Jordan's very angry about that. Poland is asking Israel to apologize for remarks made at the Warsaw Summit, where they basically accused Poland of cooperating with the Nazis and even made the comment that Poles suck anti-Semitism with their milk, which is very colorful and completely and utterly wrong, as is the claim that Poland cooperated with the Nazis. That's historically wrong. And Poland has a right to be upset at that. Of course, it'll be a cold day before they get an apology from Israel. But I think Israel has reached the point in its hubris where it's actually starting to do more damage to itself than it realizes here. Here in the United States, and I'm very surprised this happened, a U.S. appeals court has reopened a $1 billion lawsuit against Sheldon Adelson, which seeks to hold him and more than 30 others liable for war crimes and support of Israel's illegal settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. Now, Sheldon Adelson is a private citizen. He does not have any kind of sovereign immunity. And in funding those illegal settlements, he is in fact guilty of criminal actions. So yeah, there's cause to sue there. Now, how far this lawsuit is going to get, I don't know, because I'm sure that Sheldon Adelson is already on the phone to Netanyahu. Netanyahu's already on the phone to Donald Trump saying, come on, this is utterly ridiculous. Yeah, all this illegal settlement nonsense. You know, God gave us this land. It's all ours. And God is above the United Nations. Researchers at Duke University and the University of New Hampshire have just released a study on Israel's targeting of Palestinian agriculture, water, and energy infrastructures. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And yeah, I'm getting, people are sending me in these stories about it's snowing in Southern California. It's snowing in Porter Ranch, Calabasas, and apparently they're expecting it to snow in the Hollywood Hills. And, you know, after all the years that Claire and I lived there, that's a real shock to consider, snow coming on down in the Hollywood Hills. I mean, we're talking about, you know, the Griffith Park area, the Observatory, Universal Studios. Man, that is just wild. Okay. Washington, D.C. is still wringing its hands over the fact that Turkey would prefer to buy the S-400 air defense system from Russia rather than whatever it is the United States has in the discount bin. And the official reason for that is that all these U.S. systems work together, which to an extent they do. That was a big part of the whole CEC plan, that they can cooperate and work together. And obviously, if Turkey has the S-400, it won't be able to interact and cooperate with the American systems, which may tell us more about Turkey than the United States is willing to admit here. All right, getting on back down to Haiti. And again, these armed people were arrested with all these weapons, and the Americans were just allowed to fly home. No charges. They were just sent home. But these mass protests in Haiti, it threatens the oligarchic structure. And it's turned the place into a mess. Haiti has become the ultimate neoliberal experiment that has forced its people to live in conditions so horrible. They've got rivers of sewage running through the city streets. Even the country's U.S.-backed president, Jovenel Moise, recently called the entire country a latrine. And that's why the people are upset. And the irony here is that even as the United States tries to foment a public uprising against the government in Venezuela, they're clearly trying to intervene to prevent a public uprising against the government in Haiti. Little double standard there. Getting on back to the Yellow Vests, they're all over the place. They had a protest in front of the United Nations headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. And I mean, this all started back in mid-November. It's still going on, and it's still spreading. Apparently, there are Yellow Vest protests up in Canada. We know there have been Yellow Vest protests here in the United States. They're not being reported by the corporate media. They don't want you slaves getting uppity ideas that you could actually change this country for the better by taking to the streets in a yellow vest. Anyway, we're going to take a break for station identification. We're going to be back with hour number 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. Now, here's a very interesting article. And this came out of Breitbart. And the headline reads, Congressman call for U.S. designation of Mexican cartels as terror orgs. And specifically mentioned Los Zetas and Gulf. And interestingly enough, they went down the list there. Sinaloa was not mentioned. And the reason I bring that up is because of the story we had earlier in the week pointing out that the U.S. government has been in secret partnership with the Sinaloa cartel for quite a while. Remember, Sinaloa was getting all those guns from Fast and Furious. I mean, there is a long, long relationship between the U.S. government and illicit drugs. It's the same thing that happened during Prohibition. It reached a point where basically everybody inside the government, in one way or the other, was connected with the gangsters. And we've repeated that fatal mistake. We know that CIA has been engaged in the illegal drug trade going back at least as far as Vietnam in order to acquire funds for operations that were not approved by Congress or that the CIA didn't want Congress to know about. You probably heard of the Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale University, which has basically been part of the career path of so many of our leaders. That was actually built on opium money. Now, granted, at the time, opium was a legal crop. It was looked down on, but it was legal and very profitable. And they set up what was called the Russell Trust, which is the official name of Skull and Bones. And that's where they got that money to build that castle. It's drug money. Okay, diplomats of Iran and China are working together to deepen their strategic partnership. This is going to be very, very important as Iran comes under threat from the West. And I'm sure that China's interest is probably similar to that of Russia's. We don't want to let the West get any closer than they already have. Now, here is a very interesting article. This is coming out of Politico. Donald Trump said Tuesday there was, quote, no rush, end quote, to denuclearize North Korea, whose leader, Kim Jong-un, he's going to meet with next week in Vietnam. He said, I have no pressing time schedule. He'd like to see ultimately denuclearization of North Korea. And he said, ultimately, we'll see that. But I think Trump is understanding that he's not going to get it. And now he's just putting it off into the far-off future so that he doesn't have to go over to North Korea and say, you will denuclearize now, and Kim Jong-un says no, and it's a political and public relations nightmare for Donald Trump. So I'm not in a rush. It's going to happen eventually. Don't need to make a big deal about it. Over at Zero Hedge, they had an article. The headline is America an international rogue nation? And the instant I saw that headline, the first thing I thought is that a trick question? And they go down all of these recent deceptions and wars, including Saddam's nuclear weapons, which of course didn't exist. And then you had Libya, Syria. Right now, the United States military is in 39% of the countries around the world. I would say, yeah, the United States has gone rogue. It's definitely behaving like a rogue. It's a warmongering, empire-building rogue nation here. All right, getting into the domestic politics, article from the Political Insider. The headline, you're going to like this one. Another day, another wacky liberal steps into the crowded 2020 race. And of course, what they're talking about is Senator Bernie Sanders formally announcing his presidential bid. Now, there'd been a lot of rumor and speculation that he was going to step on in, but he made it official on Tuesday on Fox News on the Ingraham angle. And remember, he got really, really close in 2016. He really did. So we'll see what's going to happen with him. But this particular wacky liberal managed to pick up $6 million in campaign donations just in the first 24 hours. And that tells me he is going to be formidable in 2020. And I'm sure all the other Democratic candidates out there are, going through their spreadsheets trying to figure out how the Bernie factor is going to change the equations here. Alrighty. Apparently there's a new Hill-Harris X poll showing that Michelle Obama is tied with Biden as the 2020 front runner. Now, this poll was taken before Bernie officially stepped on in. Even though he was mentioned on this. And I think this poll shows that Democrats have totally abandoned rational thinking and gone totally over to image is everything, which explains why Hollywood is Democratic. Michelle Obama is simply not qualified to be president. At least with Hillary, as corrupt as she is, she had been a lawyer and had prior government experience. The only thing Michelle has done is screw up kids' school lunches. So basically, 25% of the poll respondents came down for Michelle Obama. 25% came down over Joe Biden. Kamala Harris got 12%. Bernie Sanders, and again, this is before he formally announced, 11%. Beto O'Rourke, Bloomberg, Senator Elizabeth Warren, 6%, 5%, and 5% respectively. Cory Booker did not even show up on the screen here. Now, getting on back to Elizabeth Warren, she's already on the campaign trail, and during a campaign stop in Georgia, she got heckled. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Why did you lie?" Which is, of course, a reference to her bogus claim of Native American ancestry. She's not going to be able to leave that behind. She's absolutely not going to be able to leave that behind. It's one thing to say, my family told me I was Native American as a curiosity, but Elizabeth Warren used that on school applications, on job applications. She played it as hard as she could to get a special advantage. And that's what I think has people upset. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. There are rumblings that the Mueller probe has completed its final report, and apparently Attorney General Barr is going to announce the end of the Mueller probe imminently. And so far, it's a confidential report that will be submitted to Congress in the very near future. The White House is already saying it'll be up to the Department of Justice whether or not to make it public. And if they're keeping this report confidential, I think that tells us they didn't find anything. 2 years and $4 million. They came up with zip. But the corporate media, they're still going to be out there. Collusion. In fact, Andrew McCabe was out there trying to justify the decision to investigate Trump as a Russian agent, saying it was based on public information, not secret intelligence. So he was being interviewed by CNN's Anderson Cooper, and Cooper asked, are there other things that haven't been made public at this point that contributed to the opening of the investigation? And McCabe says, no. They just went after Trump. They're never going to go after Hillary despite all the evidence of wrongdoing, but they're going to keep going after Trump. And McCabe has said he believes it's possible that Trump is a secret Russian agent. He's still pushing that one out there. Of course, he's also selling a new book, and that's why one reason why he might be making these spectacular statements. But I've never seen such infighting in the government. I know there's infighting in the government. It's never been so visible to the public, and I see that as a sign of the deterioration of this nation. Okay. During McCabe's interview with 60 Minutes, McCabe kept talking about articulable facts. And apparently he's coining his own phrase, trying to explain why the intelligence community started spying on the Trump team. But the justification for mounting a probe should not lie in weasel words. It belongs in something known in law enforcement circles as paragraph 1. They didn't have anything. It was a fishing expedition. Now, paragraph 1 in federal investigations lays out precisely why the investigation began and how. You can't skip over it with fanciful phrases or empty verbiage. But in the case of this counterintelligence probe targeting Trump, it's been 2 years and nobody has articulated a clear reason why it even started in the first place. Over at the FBI, a top official has admitted they infiltrated the Trump campaign. Just don't call it spy. We were just maintaining close contact. And this was all part of the FBI's Operation Crossfire Hurricane. That was its code name. And it sounds a lot like FBI informant Stephen Halper, the former Oxford University professor who was paid over $1 million by the Obama Department of Defense between 2012 and 2018, with nearly half of it surrounding the 2016 election. All right. Now, more coming out from Bruce Orr. Apparently, there was a lot more behind that dossier than we had been told. Basically, Bruce Orr played an essential and unorthodox role carrying politically tainted allegations of Donald Trump Russia collusion to the FBI during the 2016 elections. First part of it was this unverified intelligence from Trump-hating former British spy Christopher Steele, author of the now discredited infamous Russian dossier. Next, it was sketchy intelligence starting in August of 2016 from Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson, an opposition research contractor who hired Steele and was paid to help Hillary Clinton's campaign dig up political dirt on Trump, which they didn't find. Now we're finding out that Bruce Orr admitted to Congress last year he also took Russia information that his wife Nellie Orr assembled against Trump on a computer drive and delivered that to the FBI in 2016. Can you say conflict of interest? I knew you could. So the short version is Russiagate is in a tailspin. It's heading down in flames. The Senate found no evidence of collusion. It looks like Mueller found no evidence of collusion. And along with that, of course, the DNC hacking narrative. Oh, Russia hacked the DNC email servers. Well, we already know that the files were copied off too quickly to go over the internet. Somebody copied those files onto a flash drive and walked them out the door, most likely Seth Rich, because the leaks stopped after Seth Rich was killed. Judicial Watch is now suing the Department of Justice to obtain records related to these officials who were trying to plan to remove Donald Trump from office using the 25th Amendment. And again, I want to clarify how that 25th Amendment works. If a majority of the cabinet and the vice president all agree the president is unable to fulfill his duties, the president is temporarily removed from office and replaced with the vice president. Then the president has the option of proving he is fit to return to office, at which point he must be allowed. There is no provision in the 25th Amendment that involves the Department of Justice. They were stepping way outside their jurisdiction. Apparently, Democrats in the House of Representatives are going to use Michael Cohen's testimony to the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to mount an impeachment attempt against Donald Trump. They're going to oust Trump with testimony from Cohen. And there's a small technicality, of course. The House can impeach, but only the Senate can remove. That's what happened to Bill Clinton. He was impeached in the House of Representatives. The Senate refused to remove him. I've never seen the infighting so public. It's almost like they don't care anymore that we, the American people, are seeing them going after each other with hammers and tongs. And, of course, they're still trying to destroy Ilhan Omar over her anti-Semitism because she said that AIPAC is influencing members of Congress. Well, every lobbying group influences members of Congress. That's what they're paid to do. But only in the case of AIPAC is questioning that practice called anti-Semitism. Let's say that beer breweries have a lobbying group, and beer breweries want a relaxation on the number of mandated preservatives they put in their beer so they can make beers that are much more like what you find in Bavaria. And let's say that Ilhan Omar had questioned the beer brewers' lobby influence on Congress. Would people say that she hated beer drinkers, and beer brewers? That's how silly it is. But there is Jewish power out there, and everybody talks about it, the Jewish lobby power. We see it in AIPAC and the existence of a racist state that is sustained by terror and endless war. But you can't criticize the terror and endless war without being branded an anti-Semite, if not a Nazi. If it wasn't for the Israel lobby, Americans wouldn't have so much Muslim blood on their hands, or being worse than bankrupt, having fought so many wars for Israel. If it wasn't for the Israel lobby, questioning the Holocaust wouldn't be a crime in 16 European countries. No other event in human history is so fascistically protected from scrutiny. So it is there. But again, I think the world is getting restive. I think they've had 60 years of this, and they're starting to squirm and say, no, we want our government to be in control of our nation, not a foreign power. Now, a little bit of good news. The Supreme Court ruled in Timbs versus State of Indiana that state governments must abide by the 8th Amendment's prohibition on the imposition of excessive fines for criminal offenses. And what this was is Indiana seized a vehicle worth $42,000 as a penalty for selling 4 grams of heroin. Lower courts had found the seizure to be grossly disproportionate, and apparently Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote the opinion for the court. And what this means is this is basically a hammer blow at civil forfeiture, saying that you can't seize somebody's house because you found a marijuana cigarette inside that their son dropped, which actually has happened. So that's a little bit of victory. And I'm glad that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is back there and healthy. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, first of all, McCabe, he should be writing his book from a jail cell in an orange jumpsuit. It's a shame that this guy is getting away, they're getting away with what he did, as well as a lot of these refugees from a police state. Well, actually, these police state types. The other thing is, I'm not surprised that...
Okay, I'm going to have to put you on hold here. We're going to have to take a break for commercials. I'm going to put you on hold. Don't hang up. We'll come right back to you. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we are talking with Mark in North Carolina. And Mark, you were about to start on another topic.
Yeah, well, it's kind of related, but because it's all has to do with the ignorance of people. I was working out at the gym today, and they had both the fake news network and a crap news network on, and all they were talking about, I could tell, was that stupid case there in Chicago. What's his name? Jesse Smollett or something like that.
Yeah, Jesse Smollett.
I knew
we're being conditized. I'm pretty sure we're being conditized.
First day I even heard that thing about him. First of all, I never even heard of the show in the first place. But second of all, just knowing he was an actor and the way it was described, I knew it was phony from the get-go, and I never didn't even bother following it. But it's all they do. It's the shiny object, Mike. Meanwhile, you have a case. You have now proof by the mainstream media itself. In other words, the BBC that gas attack last year that almost got us to World War III was a false flag.
Yes,
it was actually perpetrated by the so-called white helmets. Okay, nothing in the. The only thing you hear anything about is, like I said, is the independent media and things like RT and Sputnik. That's it. Other than that, nothing. And I'm telling you, Mike, this is one of the problems. The people are so dumbed down, and I don't say all the people. The problem is, Mike, people our age, even a little bit younger, they still watch mainstream news. They still think that. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, a guy I used to work with. He knows nothing about the stuff what's going on the net. He knows nothing about what goes on YouTube, on the news stuff. He knows nothing about RT. He knows not other than he thinks, oh, you're watching commie propaganda or something, or Sputnik. He does, all he knows is the garbage that he hears in Fox News and some of these stupid radio shows like a Sean Hannity, a Rush Limbaugh, or what's that, Mark Levin, or some of these other clowns. He knows nothing about it. He doesn't even know about Alex Jones, really, other than he heard he's crazy. The man's crazy. By the way, the job for InfoWars, they should be ashamed of themselves. I turned them on for a while before, and that's all they were talking about, too, that Jesse, what's his name, Smollett or whatever? Jesse
Smollett.
Yeah, and this is the problem. People, they get their news still from mainstream news. Look at with Tulsi Gabbard. They're doing everything they can to stop her from getting any kind of publicity. And as far as Bernie Sanders goes, I think it's wrong what he did. He should have, instead of jumping in a race, he should have put his full support behind her. That would have given her campaign some kind of impetus,
Well, unfortunately, because Tulsi appears to be genuinely anti-war, she doesn't have a snowball's chance in the dark regions of getting anywhere near that nomination.
I don't agree, Mike. I don't agree. I think just like Trump, he got the nomination. Of course, he turns out he didn't. I think she could. I think people are sick and tired of these wars. Especially younger people.
No. You're not understanding what I'm saying. It's not a matter of what the voters are doing. I'm saying that Tulsi, she will not be getting the financial support. They will sabotage her. We've seen how dirty politics is in this day and age, and they want her out of the race. They want nothing but pro-war, pro-business pro-money junkie candidates lined up there, from which then we, the American voter, think that we actually have some kind of a choice.
I'll tell you how she gets the money, Mike. She gets it from small contributions. Okay?
Well, she's got a website up and running here.
Huh?
She's got a website up and running, and feel free to make a donation. I am. Don't get me wrong. I like her, on a gut level, which I shouldn't be doing that anyway. I certainly disagree with her on a lot of her liberal policies, like the Second Amendment. But I do believe she's genuinely anti-war. She's the only Democratic candidate so far who's actually served in a combat zone.
Right. Now, I was listening to Fault Lines today with Lee Stranahan and Garland Nixon. One is used to be a Breitbart reporter. The other one is a very, kind of towards the left. He admits he's towards the left, but both of them are populists. And they, as a matter of fact, Stranahan got fired by Breitbart because he tried to do his job the way it's supposed to be done. He tried to be the reporter that he really is, and they would squelch his stories. But what they were saying is Tulsi is the most important candidate because she is going to stop. She wants to stop the deep state. That's what this is all about. The money, like you said, the money junkies, the Zionists.
Yeah, but so did Trump. So did Trump, and he got blocked. And
Trump lied.
Yeah. Anyway, listen, I got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And remember the Covington High School students and that confrontation at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., and everybody just went completely, those terrible, MAGA hat wearing white kids, and they were being cruel to this Native American senior and to all these surrounding blacks. And then, of course, the full unedited tape came on out and showed the situation had been quite the reverse. It had been the blacks were harassing the white people, and then this Native American basically walked into the middle, started banging his drum right in their face, and they remained remarkably cool. It was obviously an attempt to provoke a reaction. And so the story completely fell apart. Another manufactured hate crime hoax, upstaging Jussie. And now the students, or one of the students, has hired attorneys, and they're suing the Washington Post for $250 million in compensatory and punitive damages, and I hope he gets it, although it's going to be an uphill battle because the Washington Post is going to say, we just went with the best information we had at the time. There's going to have to find some way to prove there was intent to defame this kid. The Washington Post is going to claim absence of malice. But if the attorney is a good one, they might. This kid could wind up owning the Washington Post. All righty, over in Chicago, a federal judge ruled Tuesday a lawsuit aimed at scuttling President Obama's $500 million library may proceed. And this building has been called an ugly waste of taxpayer resources. It's also taking up some parkland beside Lake Michigan that the public uses. And there's a group called Protect Our Parks, and they basically want the building blocked. For one thing, it's a misnomer to call it the Presidential Library. It's called the Obama Presidential Center. The actual library is going to be somewhere else. It's just vanity, ego. Obama wants to build a monument to himself. But the lawsuit to halt it is being allowed to proceed. So we'll see what happens with that. All right, so let's talk about Jussie Smollett. As I said before, it's still on Fox News. They've got a camera on him. He's leaving the courtroom building. He's opening the car door. He's getting in. Will he fasten his seatbelt? I don't know. And earlier there was a police conference where the Chicago chief of police basically came out and excoriated this kid. Said, the damage that he has done to the city is immense. I don't think so. I think the damage is really more toward liberalism, certainly toward the Empire TV show. But over at CNN, I can imagine they're having to cover the story now that Jesse's bail was set at $100,000, and he's going to have to go to court. He's been hit with a felony complaint, which means jail time. Now, Geraldo is out there saying, wow, Jussie Smollett played us. Should have been more suspicious, Geraldo, especially after that debacle with the gangster's hidden secret vault. Al Capone. Interestingly enough, just before this whole court thing started, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx recused herself from the investigation. And First Assistant State's Attorney Joseph Magatz is acting as the state's attorney for this prosecution. Apparently, this Kim Foxx described the reason for her recusal as familiarity with potential witnesses in the case. Good reason to recuse yourself here. But it is a felony criminal charge. Smollett did turn himself in. And it's just going to go downhill from here. Now, why did he do this? Everybody's saying, why did he do this? Now, originally, the story was floating around that Smollett was going to get written out of the show Empire, and he wanted to build up some publicity to convince the show's producers to keep him on. Then we heard from the show's writers that no, there were no plans to write him out of the show, although obviously they'll have to do so now because he's going to be behind bars, most likely. And apparently it came out earlier today. Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson talking to Smollett and to these two Nigerian brothers who helped him. It turned out that Smollett wanted more money for his acting gig, and he thought publicity would help him get it. And yes, it would. It's something I've seen in Hollywood many times. The more famous you are, the more money you can command. And as it turns out, remember that racist, homophobic letter that arrived at the studio for Empire the week before the attack? Jussie Smollett faked that one himself. And then he got angry that the show's producers didn't get excited. They didn't call a press conference. That was his first attempt to get PR. And that's when he hired these two brothers for $3,500. It's because he wanted more money. Because, after all, how could he possibly live on just $65,000 per episode? That's what he gets paid for that gig. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Jim in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I share Mark's frustration. Even though a lot of people are waking up, still not enough. Because I know so many people, acquaintances, people at work, and they either watch Fox or CNN. It seems like 70%, 80% of the people I know, whatever they, conservatives, they watch Fox.
Well, I don't know where you work or where you hang out, but I mean, the audience numbers for all of the corporate media newscasts are way, way down. So the majority of the American people are no longer watching them.
Yeah, well, maybe it's just the circles I go in.
Yeah, I think I think that may be the problem, because the circles that I go in, everybody's pretty much informed and knows what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, another thing I was going to mention, in the Post, New York Post, going on about this Alabama woman who wants to come back to the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Whose boyfriend, yeah. And I wonder, and Trump condemned her. Didn't the CIA fill Trump in, brief him that ISIS are our guys?
Yeah,
CIA
but
guys.
Trump is doing what he's doing for the consumption of the American people, whom Trump is still convinced doesn't know what's going on behind the scenes.
You know, we know, informed people who listen to you, that ISIS is a CIA creation. So you'd figure the CIA would give her a medal.
Well,
right?
The CIA didn't actually originally create ISIS. It did sort of form itself, but early on the CIA got close to them and started basically infiltrating and providing money and supplies and basically hijacked them to use as a tool against Bashar al-Assad.
Yes. Well, I mean, ISIS, it's just the rebels, right? They're just the moderate rebels.
Well, ISIS is not moderate.
No, but, you know, when the media talked about the moderate rebels, that could be anybody fighting Assad.
Well, I think the term moderate rebels was a made-up propaganda term because the American public was saying, why are you funding these violent terrorist groups? And so somebody came up with the idea of, well, there's the real terrorists and then there's the kind of like sort of terrorist light. And we're supporting the terrorist light group, which turned out to be a complete joke. Everybody was getting weapons.
Yes.
Okay?
It's true. Yes. Well,
all right.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Have a good show.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Steve in Chicago. Steve, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Doing good.
Good. I want to talk about the Smollett case. I'm from Chicago, and I've been noticing a lot of this separation of all these facts coming out, whether it's sourced or unsourced, from major stream media. And I really wanted to focus on is that Smollett case is a very small point of what's really going on here in Chicago. Is, you know, we got this Rahm Emanuel guy.
Yes.
He's not running for re-election, which I'm glad for. You know, he doesn't need to be the mayor of this city anymore. But what I'm saying, what I want to bring to the attention of the listeners is that something bigger than this Smollett case here in Chicago is the fact that within the days of him proclaiming that he was a victim, all these things happened regarding his case, is that I just want to say to your listeners, this is a little bit graphic, but it's the truth, is that a 1-year-old baby got shot in the head, and it made media reports, and nobody's really paying attention to this. And, you know, all we see is Smollett this, Smollett that. And the thing is there's so many problems going on here in Chicago, and I'm almost at a loss for words.
Well, basically,
really
you know,
like
the corporate media, Jussie Smollett presented the corporate media with a scenario that fit in exactly with the agenda, you know, about hate and victimhood and liberalism. He's black. He's also gay. And the corporate media, they bid it. They swallowed it hook, line, and sinker, and they went with it. And the reason the story is so huge now is because it did blow up in their faces, and it proved that hate crimes can sometimes be hoaxes. And the good news is it's triggering people to go back and look at other so-called hate crimes that were given a lot of media play. And they're finding that most, if not all of those, are hoaxes as well. And of course the liberals are wringing their hands saying, no, you shouldn't talk about hate crime hoaxes. It's going to make it difficult for real victims of real hate crimes to get justice. And my answer to that is absolutely not, because if their stories make sense and they've got evidence, then everything's going to be fine. But the corporate media uses these hoaxes to manipulate us, whether it's Jussie Smollett or some kind of a false flag involving Venezuela. That's how we're controlled and manipulated, through illusion.
Right, and I'm glad you bring that to a good point, because here in Chicago, there's a lot of things going on, just like any other major city in America, whether it's New York, San Francisco, Boston. I myself am from Connecticut, and I understand, big fan of your program. I know you grew up in New Hampshire, so I eventually moved out to Chicago. But I mean, these things are not just sectionalized from just where we live here in America. These are very big things going on here.
Well, you're talking to the wrong person here. You're talking to the wrong person, because it was the corporate media that made Jussie Smollett a headline story while ignoring all others. In fact, I understand that there was a genuine racially inspired beating that took place nearby that didn't even make the press because everybody was just so focused on Jussie Smollett. Anyway, Steve, we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You sound like your audio changed. Are you on a phone now or something? Your audio is notably changed.
No, I'm on the same setup I've always been on. Well, I mean, since last year.
Oh, you sound like you're suddenly on a cell phone or something. Okay, never mind. I wanted to suggest that there might be another area in which we're being kind of condensized with media hype, and that is in the realm of weather. Now, I know that there are severe weather storms and severe weather strikes various areas in the country, and it's fair play, to certainly cover all what's going on when someplace gets hit with a horrible, storm, straight wind, snows, or whatever. But in the past few weeks, and this has been going on for years, we seem to get a lot of hype about the most predictable and normal of winter storm, activity. We recently had a storm, a little bit of snow. It resulted in between 1 and 2 inches of snow in the area, followed by a little bit of sleet, followed by some rain, which has washed most of it away. But the media makes such a circus out of these things. I mean, I'm 58 years old. I started driving in 1976 when there were still cars on the road with bias-ply tires that were rear-wheel drive. Sometimes you put your snow tires on, and they had studded snow tires, and people put chains on and stuff. And people got around, and even back in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I remember,
Glenn, I'm going to have to let you go because we've got to take a break for commercials. And I think it isn't a question of how much snow is coming down. It's that it's coming down in places that have never seen it before. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're still talking about the Jussie Smollett story. And it's interesting to see the reactions to the revelation that this was a hoax. Over at CNN, Don Lemon is out there. He's just worried that Fox News and Trump are going to pounce on this story to undermine trust and confidence in the corporate media. Well, you guys did it to yourselves. You ignored basic journalistic standards. Jussie presented you a scenario of what you wanted to see. A hate crime against a guy who's both gay and black, and you bit onto it. without doing any checking whatsoever. That's not the way journalism is supposed to be done. Things are getting a little violent, apparently, because there was a conservative activist who was protesting fake hate crimes, and he got violently assaulted. And this guy was recruiting for Turning Point USA, which is a conservative youth organization, and recruiters were standing in front of a table with the factually correct sign stating, "Hate crime hoaxes hurt real victims." And they were approached by detractors multiple times throughout the day at the University of California in Berkeley. One individual threatened to shoot the conservative students, knocked his phone out of his hand, and hit him in the head. So that's going to be the reaction. Don't talk about hate crime hoaxes. We will beat you up. All righty. Now, as the Jussie Smollett controversy continues to unfold and the debate over the validity of hate crimes increases, one watchdog group has found more than 50 hate crime hoaxes carried out over the last 7 years on America's college campuses. Apparently, they found, Montclair State University students claim to find hateful graffiti in their dorms threatening minorities and women. Black blank, you will die. Investigators found out the students had done it themselves. The problem with all of this, of course, is that fake hoaxes lead to real laws. And before the Jussie Smollett case had unwound, New Jersey's Democratic Senator Cory Booker basically rushed to introduce an anti-lynching law. Well, there's already a law against lynching. It's called murder. But hey, let's have one more law just to prove I'm doing something about what's going on. And don't forget, when this first happened, before it became known that this was a hoax, Maxine Waters blamed this all on President Trump. Oh, it's all Trump's fault because of hate crimes attack, against gays and black people. Mad Maxine. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. Somebody just took a poll and found out that more than a third of Americans named the U.S. government as the most important problem facing the United States. And this is the highest percentage ever recorded. 35% of Americans said that government was the most important problem due to its corruption, incompetence. They're absolutely right here. This was a Gallup survey. This one was taken basically at the start of this month here. All right, let's talk a little bit about the economic news here. And let's see, how did the stock markets end up? They weren't doing very well earlier in the day. They ended in the red, not by a huge amount, but still in the red. It's not looking very good here. Around the world, in fact, the automotive industry is failing. And I think a big part of the problem is that the automotive industry, like so many others, basically was operating on planned obsolescence. That the affordable automobiles, the lower cost automobiles, are designed to only last 5 years, then you buy a new one. The high-end automobiles are designed to last 8 years, 5 years for the first owner, and then 3 years for the secondary market. But with the consumer economy turning into a desert, people are hanging onto their cars as long as they possibly can. We held onto that Honda for 18 years before it got stolen and stripped. And we're seeing that everywhere. It's the same thing that's impacting iPhone sales. iPhone's model was come out with a new really hip phone every 3 years, and people will just turn in their old phones and buy the new phones. Doesn't work anymore. People are hanging on to stuff that they already own that is working just fine. And if you have an entire economy built on planned obsolescence, that slowdown in consumer spending, that unwillingness for consumers to go along with that kind of salesmanship, that's a big problem. And it's hitting the automotive industry, and it's pushing everyone towards recession, according to Business Insider. Honda, Nissan, Ford, and General Motors have announced thousands of job cuts in Europe. Jaguar Land Rover is also cutting jobs. Now, UBS shares have tumbled. A French judge has slapped the bank with a 5.1 billion with a B tax evasion fine. In the Paris court found UBS guilty of having actively helped wealthy French clients hide money from French tax authorities in undeclared Swiss bank accounts and ordered the bank to pay $5.1 billion. This is a record sum in France and almost hit the maximum in French law, which would have been $6 billion. Jesse James was right. The bankers are the real outlaws. Gold is nearing its $1,350 per ounce resistance level, which always seems to be a bounce point. In the last 5 years, it has been up there 4 times, and every time it gets at that price, something pushes the price back down. It gets smacked down real hard. It's being manipulated, obviously. It's all fakery. Okay, going to skip that one here. Amazon has paid 0 corporate tax for a second year in a row, despite a net income of $11.2 billion. And that's largely due to Trump's tax bonanza of 2017. The corporations and the ultra-rich, they got all the tax breaks. Middle-class taxpayers, they didn't get anything. A lot of people are coming back from their tax preparers absolutely shocked. What do you mean I owe the IRS? Now, Ocasio-Cortez, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is still trying to defend her role in sinking Amazon's move to New York City, claiming the deal would have been one of the biggest giveaways in state history and would have priced people out of the local community. And yes, New York was going to shovel a lot of taxpayer money into Amazon to lure them there. And yes, Amazon being there could have started raising local rents, real estate prices. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez comes across as a joke. But think about what's been going on in the communities around Silicon Valley, when all those high-tech companies were lured to that one area, and they basically turned it into one of the most expensive places in the world to live, to the point where people who are working full-time jobs in those Silicon Valley companies are having to live in their cars. The economy is totally out of whack. It's totally out of balance. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. But the economy is unbalanced. The wealth inequality is at record highs, and you can't have a smoothly running economy that way. Yes, it's good that smart people and creative people, people who work hard, get richer, but you have to make sure that the economy doesn't get this much out of balance, or the entire economy is at risk. What we were saying about iPhone sales and automobile sales. People just don't have the money to buy these things. And these entire sectors of the economy are looking at collapse here. And this is going to be global because of economic globalism. As the United States slides into recession, so does Europe. Now, here's an interesting story from Deutsche Bank, which is another one of these large banks that keeps engaging in nefarious deals. Apparently, Donald Trump's business interests owe Deutsche Bank some money. And back in 2016, Deutsche Bank decided, or rather talked about extending the Trump loan terms because they were afraid he might default, and that would put them in the uncomfortable position of trying to seize the assets of the President of the United States. And I think it was a good business decision, but we'll see what happens. Now, here's a interesting little announcement. This is coming from Putin himself. Russia's foreign exchange reserves can now cover all of the debt owed by both the government and domestic businesses. Think about that one. For the first time in history, Russia's reserves fully cover foreign debt, including government and the commercial debt sector. The country's external debt amounts to $453 billion. Its international reserve funds stand at $475 billion. Now that is a well-managed national economy. Which reminds me, how's the U.S. economy doing? Do our reserves cover our debt? I don't think so. Over at the Washington Compost, they're trying to compare Trump to Hitler over the national emergency for the border wall. And they're basically saying that the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party began with a national emergency. Actually, no. It began with the passage by the legislature of the Enabling Acts. But everybody's going on back to Hitler and or the Berlin Wall, and I forget who it was trying to compare Trump's wall with the Berlin Wall, and the two were completely opposite. The Berlin Wall was about keeping people in. Trump's wall is about keeping people out. It was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who compared the Trump border wall with the Berlin Wall. Thank you for that. Maxine Waters is now out there saying that people who support the wall do not love this country. That if you're patriotic, you will have open borders. That is a bit of a reach. I mean, really. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Tom in Connecticut. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Have you heard of this Audi green diesel thing that they've been developing for the last couple of years?
No.
You should look into it. It's very curious. They take it's kind of an odd take on breaking hydrogen from water and making it into a running your car in water idea that's been around for a long time.
I'm looking at it right now, and apparently they've invented a synthetic fuel that's made from carbon dioxide and water. Well, there's a solution for Al Gore to get behind.
Yeah, but hello, that's been around for a couple years now.
Yeah, this article was in 2015.
Yeah, and they're trying to get traction with it. Evidently, the prime minister, somebody highly placed in the German government,
yes,
ran their car on this stuff. And that, like Tesla tried to get going with the fact that you could buy their car and then you could charge it for no charge at their official charging stations.
Yeah.
Right? I can't believe that Audi isn't pushing that and saying, if you have a diesel vehicle, we can we'll give you endless fuel.
Well, here's the reason we may not.
It's benign to the environment by what they're saying as far as the.
Here's the question: what does it cost to make this fuel? The article says it's a theoretical exercise that the scientists were able to accomplish this. Can it be brought to an industrial scale at an affordable price? That's one of the reasons why the whole ethanol situation fell apart. It turned out, first of all, it wasn't carbon neutral. And because ethanol has less energy than gasoline, people had to buy more of it and burn more of it to get the same amount of work out of their cars, and so it turned out to be more expensive. Now, if they
this appears to be cost effective. The whole riff on electrolysis, I was involved with a whole bunch of people back in the day that wanted to run your car on water.
Yes.
But the electrolysis nature of trying to split hydrogen and oxygen and then make it a viable combustible product to run your car on became the big issue. Evidently, these guys have cracked the code. I've read about this for, because I was very curious, given what I've known about these things, that they feel it's economically viable to do this because of whatever process they have found to do this kind of thing. And, green deals, whatever, it's just odd that these people they're a massive frigging car company, and that they haven't been able to get any kind of press coverage on this. They cover stuff that is possible in the next 5 years. Oh, let's find a cancer cure in the next 10 years. Like research indicates that this may be possible. This is happening now. And it's the nature of mainstream media, I guess, that they don't want to really say, oh, look, there's something by a major company. It's not like internet bizarro world that somebody comes up with a free device.
You need to remember that the petroleum industry has a long history of animosity toward diesel. When the diesel engine was first developed, it was designed to run on things like vegetable oil and
hemp oil.
What's hemp oil?
Well, running on diesel fuel. I mean, a lot of information is out there that they developed engines to run on hemp oil back in the day. Ford, even.
Yeah, they were, and they probably could be developed again. But you need to remember that after Diesel himself died, and I might add under suspicious circumstances, the technology to produce diesel was bankrolled by the Rothschilds, who then turned around and offered to fund development of tanks for one of the two world wars. I'm forgetting which one. And the deal was that they made diesel a very specific fuel, and then part of the deal to fund the tanks was that I think it was Great Britain would buy their diesel fuel from these Rothschild-owned companies. So diesel's engine was designed to run on just about anything you could put into it, and now because of that, commercialization factor, it requires a very specific fuel. Now, this e-diesel does look very good, but even the article I'm looking at is saying they've only got a small pilot plant, and to really have large scale, I mean, look how much money has been spent to build refineries all over the globe. You'd have to have something on a scale approaching that before e-diesel became really viable. So it may get here eventually, but
starts where it starts from. And then
it may get here eventually, but it's going to be a slow process. It's not like everybody's going to, say, "Oh, let's have e-diesel today," because it's going to take a while for that support infrastructure to develop. I mean, if you study the early history of the automobile, you have to realize there was quite a significant lag between the first automobiles getting out on the roads and the development of roadside gas stations. In the very first days, you would buy cans of gas from... Please let me finish. You would buy cans of gasoline from hardware stores, and you'd fill your tank in your front yard. And it just took a while for that all to come on up. Anyway, Tom, we're going to let you go, and thank you very much for the phone call.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
All right. Getting on back to immigration and globalism. Apparently, 25 MS-13 gang members have been deported from one of the migrant caravans in Mexico. And they were apparently concealed within the caravan of 1,600 Central American migrants just across the U.S. border. And the caravan arrived at Piedras Negras, Mexico 2 weeks ago. across the border from Eagle Pass, Texas, when officials from the Instituto Nacional de Migración identified 10 gang members from MS-13. But after warehouse scuffles with police last week, officials discovered and deported 15 more. So yeah, MS-13. Welcome to our country. We're going to have all this kind of stuff here. Maxine Waters went on TV. She's out there saying that they're going to stop President Trump's emergency declaration. We're going to have Republicans joining with us to stop this tyrant from protecting the borders of our nation. And then, of course, she spun off into, we need to impeach this guy. He's acting illegally. We've got to remove him from office. Actually, no, Trump acted within the letter of the law. Here's an example of why this refugee immigration thing is generating a hostile response. Apparently, over in Great Britain, there was this family from Cameroon in West Africa. They lived in a 3-bedroom home that was provided by the British government for $20,000 a year. And they proceeded to have kids. They now have 8 kids, and they're demanding a larger house. They've been offered a 5-bedroom house. They turned that down. They want, effectively, a mansion. Have them move in with Theresa May, I think, is a good idea. We're starting to see big, huge cracks in the British establishment. 7 members of Parliament have resigned from the Labour Party in protests at Corbyn's approach to Brexit, as well as the smear campaign of anti-Semitism against him. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about events taking place in Great Britain, where we're starting to see the Labour Party break up. Apparently 7 MPs resigned from the Labour Party protesting Jeremy Corbyn's approach to Brexit, and also in response to his anti-Semitism, which appears to have been a smear job. And apparently over on the Tory side, 3 members of Parliament announced they're going to be jumping ship. So it's all starting to come apart over there. George Galloway, in discussing the 7 MPs who left the Labour Party, described them as the 7 dwarves and says he's ready to rejoin the party. He's been out of politics for a while. He's a talk radio host, and now he wants to get back into politics here. There is a war of words going on between Sweden and Hungary, and it's escalating, and it all gets back down to this Hungary pro-family policy. And the Swedish cabinet minister is saying, boy, that's just like Nazi Germany. And just one second here. Hello? Okay, it must be a telemarketer. The reason I had to answer that is because I was expecting a call from somebody that I had to take, so I apologize for that here. So, again, this whole thing about the open borders and the refugees. Well, first it was the Confederates, and now they're coming after John Wayne. And I'm not saying that John Wayne is squeaky clean or anything, but apparently somebody found this old Playboy interview in which he expressed his honest opinion, as we all have a right to do under the First Amendment, regarding white people, homosexuality. And so, you know, he gave his views on race. This was back in 1971, back when everybody still enjoyed a right to express their honest opinion. Remember that old saying, I may not agree with what you're saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. That's the way this country used to work. Now it's, don't you dare say something that I might find offensive. Now, earlier in the week, we were talking about that very famous picture of this sailor kissing this woman as World War II came to an end. It's an iconic photograph. Two women claim to be the girl in the photograph, and it was made an issue because the gentleman in the photograph passed away. And we had a caller into the show saying, well, you know, today that would be considered sexual assault, and you'd get hashtag Me Too on it. It actually happened. Down in Sarasota, Florida, there is a statue based on that photo, and it's been spray painted hashtag Me Too. That is vandalism. Okay. Over at LifeSite News, they're talking about, well, actually something that happened in Edinburgh, where apparently an Edinburgh laborer shouted abuse at transgender woman. It turns out one Graham Spears, a father of two and a construction worker, was walking past a pub in Bonington with a few buddies when they passed a transgender woman, a biological male, in female clothes. And while the journalist is trying to make it sound as if Spears was screaming at the apparent victim, witnesses are saying they merely pointed and laughed. Well, some of those transgenders really get outrageous out there, and maybe they're trying to attract attention. Now, Donald Trump has announced an effort to decriminalize homosexuality worldwide. I applaud that. To my surprise, a magazine named Out, which is devoted to LGBT issues, ran an op-ed slamming Trump's efforts to decriminalize homosexual behavior across the globe, saying that it is only a cover for a colonialist attitude toward Iran. And the author of this op-ed actually defended Iran from charges that its theocratic regime has a brutal record against gays. So they're working at cross purposes here. Now, obviously, I think Trump's plan is to simply talk to nations with which we are on friendly terms and say it might be time to decriminalize gay behavior. Going to have a hard sell in the Muslim nations, I will grant you. But, you know, they're entitled to their opinions and their beliefs, and in the end, it's all opinion and belief. Nowhere is it graven in stone how we're supposed to behave. I actually got somebody upset at me the other day for reminding them there are actually different versions of the Ten Commandments. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're in the world of liberalism and political correctness, and you're not going to believe this next story. This one's happening up in Canada at the, basically in Alberta, and they have been forced to forfeit the rest of its season. This youth hockey team has been forced to forfeit the rest of its season after an online video triggered angry liberals. They're even receiving death threats. So what happened? Well, the video showed them dancing in the locker room to energizing music. That's it. What got the liberals upset was their choice of music happened to be from a group with Native American ancestry. And they're screaming cultural appropriation. I mean, this is utterly ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. Now, in my car, it'll accept a USB drive and play music from it. And I have a USB drive with a bunch of MP3s, because the original CDs were all stolen with the Honda. One of them is an album by a Native American artist. In fact, it's one of my favorite albums. I'm not guilty of cultural appropriation. I'm appreciating good music. Over at Purdue University, there are two female students were suspended for false accusations of sexual assault. Now they're suing the university to get back in. And again, hoaxes, 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 hoaxes. You've got to be very suspicious when somebody screams rape or hate crime or anti-gay crime or racism or whatever. PBS recently aired a documentary on the eugenics crusade. Now, most people of my generation, when they think eugenics, they think Nazi Germany. Not so. It began here in the United States back in the 1930s. There were laws in many states that allowed people to be forcibly sterilized. Hitler got all his ideas for race hygiene from here in the United States of America. It was because of what Hitler did with it that the eugenics movement fizzled out after World War II, but it looks like they're trying to stage a comeback here. Now, this one was pretty stupid. There's a school running a community arts center in Ohio, and they were advertising a party game where kids are instructed to eliminate the president with toy guns. The game, entitled President, has been advertised as part of a Nerf gun-themed party organized by the Olmsted Performing Arts Community Center in Berea, a suburb of Cleveland. That is just stupid that they even did that. You hear all this talk about, guns and violence, but it's okay if the violence is directed at the president, apparently. Oh, you're going to love this next one. Do you remember back in 1996, there was a play called The Vagina Monologues that was built around 15 monologues from women in the 90s. And apparently they were going to perform it at Princeton University, but they've run into a problem because the play assumes that women must have vaginas. Of course, we know in this day and age that's not necessarily true, and we don't want to offend the very, very confused people who think they're women who have the other kind of plumbing. I want to talk about that Gary Martin case. This is the Aurora, Illinois shooting that happened. And the story has all but disappeared because it didn't fit the narrative. Gary was black, and the narrative for mass gun violence is the shooters are always white. And the gun grabbers are screaming, more gun laws, more gun laws. It turns out that he wasn't supposed to own a gun. He was a convicted felon. The law just wasn't enforced. And if the workers at that factory had been carrying, maybe fewer people would have died. That's what you've got to ask every time you hear another one of these shooting cases. Oh, somebody walked in with a gun and shot 27 people. Well, what if those 27 had been armed themselves and able to return fire? There have actually been incidents of attempted mass shootings, shooters being stopped literally dead in their tracks because one of the intended victims was armed. The corporate media never reports that. They don't want you to think about the possibility that you have a right and the means to defend yourself. They want you dependent on the police. They want you dependent on the government, because dependency is slavery here. So, a lot of people have been talking about these sheriffs in these states that are passing these draconian gun laws, saying, do sheriffs really have the right to choose which laws to enforce? Because after all, the people voted to support more gun control. Isn't that how it's supposed to work? No, because we're not a democracy. In a democracy, majority rules. The USA is a constitutional republic, and that constitution is unquestionably and unambiguously the supreme law of the land. Okay, let's see. Let's skip on down here. We're going to talk about human-caused global warming here. It has snowed twice in Las Vegas this week. More is coming for Arizona. And apparently, it was such a surprise to see snow on the ground in Las Vegas. Everybody was taking pictures and videos and trying to send them out on Instagram and Facebook. It actually jammed up the internet. It slowed it down. This is the first persistent snow in Las Vegas since they started keeping records in 1937. That's what tells us a little ice age is coming on, a new Maunder minimum, a grand solar minimum. It's not how much snow is coming down, although a lot has come down. It's that it's coming down in places that haven't had it before, like down on Maui. Apparently, the weather was so bad in Las Vegas, they had to divert an American Airlines flight to Nellis Air Force Base. Flight 671 was inbound from Dallas, and they're refueling the plane, or they refueled the plane at Nellis, and it would finally make the jump over to Las Vegas, but apparently they had some visibility problems. McCarran International Airport isn't built to deal with winter weather. Now, as that caller into our show reported, snow is being reported in Calabasas, Santa Monica Mountains. Temperatures are continuing to drop. There is actually a prediction that there could be snow in the Hollywood Hills. And of course, the East Coast is getting their pounding. So, gosh darn that human-caused global warming. Getting on back to guns and gun rights. Over in Lincoln County, they responded to state gun control legislation by declaring themselves a sanctuary. And they're not the first to do it. There have been other counties across the United States who are turning the liberals' own weapon against them. We declare this county a sanctuary county for firearms owners. And apparently the Lincoln County Commissioners passed the resolution 4-1. And Lincoln County Sheriff Robert Shepard and other sheriffs across the state contend some provisions in the proposed laws are clearly unconstitutional. Out in California, there was a young man fatally shot by police after they found him unresponsive in his car with a gun in his lap. They shot him 25 times, including shooting him in the middle of his face, throat, blowing off part of his ear. Now, the police contend that the car doors were locked, and that's why they couldn't just reach in and quietly remove the gun before this guy woke up. That story fell apart. It was revealed that the passenger window on the car had been broken and was taped over with thin plastic that could have easily been cut through. 25 times. And apparently this guy was a Bay Area rapper. He was Willie McCoy, and he's a Bay Area rapper. And he was driving a Mercedes. Maybe that's why the cops went up there and checked it out. Oh, black guy in a Mercedes. Got to be something wrong there, which is profiling. There is still an argument going on between Donald Trump and Governor Gavin Newsom over the $3.5 billion that the federal government gave to California to build that high-speed rail system, which has now been pulled back. Newsom says, no, that money is ours to spend any way that we want. We want to spend it on the illegal immigrants. We can do that. This is just the president getting revenge for the Wall lawsuit. So Trump is saying it's wasted money. I agree. And you have to wonder what's going on within our government and corporate structure, that these projects will just get so out of control in terms of cost and duration. Our light rail system was supposed to be finished and running years ago. It's still being built and rebuilt and rebuilt and repaired, and the costs have gone through the roof. There's a grassroots movement out here demanding an audit. Kiewit and the state office associated with the light rail project are fighting it tooth and nail, which tells you something went wrong or something got really crooked here. Over in New York, they're cracking down on knives. And no, we're not talking about spring-operated blades like switchblades. We're talking about so-called gravity knives. These are knives that are capable of being opened by force of gravity or a slight flick of the wrist. And it's a problem because a lot of people have no way of knowing that the knives they're already carrying are about to become illegal. And again, Second Amendment issues arise here because the Second Amendment doesn't reserve the right to keep and bear firearms. It's all arms, and that includes knives. I've got some knives that would clearly be illegal under that New York law. Getting into the world of computers and so forth, researchers are now blaming YouTube for the rise in flat earthers. This is according to Ashley Landrum, assistant professor of science communication at Texas Tech University. And all but one of 30 flat earthers interviewed said they hadn't considered the earth to be flat until watching videos promoting the theory on YouTube. Promoting is exactly the word. This is a hoax being promoted to make the internet and people on the internet look kooky. It's just like claims that the moon landings were fake, or claims about chemtrails, or claims about Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster's love child. But even with the failures of Common Core, do you really think modern Americans are going to be convinced the earth is flat by a YouTube video? I don't think so. I really don't think so. And I don't know who this professor talked to. I wonder if she wound up accidentally talking to the people producing those videos. Probably she sent out a notice. Do you believe in the earth is flat? I want to interview you. And the people behind this propaganda said, oh, quick, we got to get some people over there. Not too long ago, blockchains were declared as unhackable. Unfortunately, last month, the security team at Coinbase discovered that Ethereum Classic was under attack. Its blockchain is, in fact, getting hacked. I want to go back to just having coins and paper in my pocket. I was at the store the other day, and when I was a kid, you'd go into a store, you'd grab what you wanted to buy, you'd put it on the counter, they'd punch a couple of buttons on the cash register, you'd give them money, you take your product, everybody goes home happy. Today, like they're pushing all these buttons for marketing stuff and codes, and they've got to enter this and enter your birth date for the alcohol purchase and stuff. I didn't push that many buttons flying Viking to Mars. You know, they put up these laser scanners to make the checkout process easier and more convenient, and then they junk it all up with all this other stuff. Anyway, if you are using password managers like 1Password, Dashlane, KeePass, and LastPass, they all have vulnerabilities. And it makes sense that password managers would be a target of hackers if they didn't come with built-in backdoors. And I would never, ever, ever use a password manager. And I got a lot of passwords. Okay, if you have the Google Nest Guard, which has been available since 2017, it may come as a surprise to you. It has a microphone inside. And apparently people learned about it only when Google announced that a software update would make Nest Guard voice controlled. And everybody said, we didn't know there was a microphone. How do we know it hasn't been used up to this point? Google is saying this was merely an error on their part. And no, I'm not going to have voice control. The only reason I've got Siri activated is the car doesn't work properly without it. Alrighty. Apparently down in Australia, they launched a system for automated debt collection. They called it robo-debt. And apparently over a 2-year period, this machine automation program canceled payments to at-risk people, and at least 2,030 people actually died from this mistake. Exposure, starvation, couldn't get their medicines. This is another reason I think moving into AI is premature. We can't even get the non-AI software to work correctly. Over in the EU, they're still pushing forward on their new copyright directive. And last week they published what they're calling the final draft, and it basically infuriated everybody, including the entertainment companies that lobbied for it in the first place. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today, we're talking about computers. And probably remember an old song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. Apparently there's a big problem with online dating scammers, and apparently it's costing consumers more than $143 million last year. This is coming from the Federal Trade Commission. And basically what it is, these con artists are going onto dating websites and social media. They craft a phony identity. They use a photo of somebody else, build a phony profile. They create this charming persona. And after bamboozling the victim into believing it's true love, they then ask for money. Oh, I've had a medical emergency. You know, I need some money. My car broke down. Whatever the excuse is going to be. And unfortunately, a lot of people who have never actually physically met this person that they see on the computer screen, they fork the money over. So be careful out there. There are a lot of bad people out there on social media and the dating sites here. Another one that you need to look out for are these quick sales arranger things like Let Go, because you're starting to see situations now where criminals will put out an ad for like a really good car at a really good low price, and then somebody shows up to buy it and they get robbed. Anyway, little article here. This is coming from Natural News. Is chemotherapy worth it? Studies prove that chemical intervention actually worsens the quality of life. Yeah, I got to see that with my mother. And doesn't seem to actually have a benefit to overall survival. Some research even shows that chemo spreads cancer instead of stopping it. I mean, it's highly, highly toxic. Scientists have known for years that a number of these chemotherapy drugs are actually carcinogenic themselves. Now, John Rappaport came on out with a wonderful analysis of why there are so many drug ads on TV. And he says, you're not going to remember these names, Otezla, Namzaric, Keytruda, Cosentyx, when you go to the doctor's office. The real purpose here isn't generating sales, although obviously if it does, the pharmaceutical industry likes that. It's simply by spending enough total money for ads for all drugs, they dominate the TV time for commercials. They can control the news, and that is exactly what they want to do, which is why you'd never see any stories about harmful drugs on TV. You never see any stories questioning vaccine safety on the news. The USDA has ruled that pink slime can officially be called ground beef. Now, pink slime is a food additive made from beef trimmings exposed to ammonia gas, and back in 2012 it was found in 70% of American burgers. So I think we're in the age of Soylent Pink. All right, there's some music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. Have, let's see, apparently Laura Presley will be on about election fraud with John Stadmiller. So stay tuned. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.